The aisle was set, the crowd hushed, and the love of her life waited at the altar. But as Olivia Bennet stepped forward in her dream wedding dress, her golden retriever, Charlie, blocked her path, barking with a desperation that sent shivers through the room. Guests gasped. Her mother hissed, "Olivia, go!" But Charlie wouldn't move. What began as a fairy tale ceremony was about to spiral into a heart-pounding revelation. One that would prove that love's truest vows are the ones you never see coming. The golden sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Chapel, casting a radiant glow on Olivia Bennet as she stood at the edge of the aisle. Her lace wedding gown cascaded around her in perfect folds, every detail meticulously planned for over a year. Her fiancé, Noah Turner, waited at the altar, his steady smile offering reassurance. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But then it happened. "Charlie, stop it," Olivia hissed under her breath, her voice trembling as her golden retriever pulled sharply at her gown. His bark echoed through the chapel, sharp and insistent, breaking the reverent silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the organist's melody faltered and stopped. Charlie, Olivia's faithful companion for over 10 years, was not acting like himself. His usual playful energy was replaced with something frantic, almost desperate. His warm, golden eyes, normally so full of joy, now looked up at her with a mix of urgency and fear. He pawed at her skirt again, his tail low, his breathing uneven. "Olivia, what's going on?" Her mother, Diane, whispered harshly as she rushed over in her lavender gown. "The guests are waiting. Move, now." Olivia knelt down, her veil slipping slightly as she cradled Charlie's face in her hands. His nose was warm, and his breaths came in shallow, rapid bursts. A wave of panic coursed through her. "He's not okay," she whispered, stroking his fur. "Something's wrong." "Olivia," Diane snapped, her face pale with anger. "He's just nervous because of all the commotion. Have one of the ushers take him outside. You have a wedding to get to." But Olivia wasn't listening. Her heart raced as she looked at Charlie, trembling against her. She knew this wasn't nerves. It was something much worse. From the altar, Noah stepped down, his expression shifting from joy to concern. "Olivia," he called gently, "is everything all right?" Her eyes darted from Charlie to Noah, then to her mother, who stood frozen in disbelief. Finally, Olivia made her decision. "I need to take him to the vet," she said firmly, her voice cracking. A murmur swept through the crowd. Diane's face turned ashen. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, grabbing Olivia's arm. "This is your wedding day." "I'm sorry, Mom," Olivia said, tears welling in her eyes. "But Charlie's family. I have to do this." Noah was by her side in moments, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Whatever you need," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I'm coming with you." "Olivia," Diane pleaded, "you're about to throw away the most important day of your life." "No," Olivia replied softly, looking down at Charlie. "This is the most important thing I can do today." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Olivia gathered her skirts and walked toward the chapel doors, Charlie leaning heavily against her leg. Noah followed closely, leaving the wedding party and guests whispering furiously. Diane tried to regain control of the situation, assuring everyone that the ceremony would resume shortly. But Olivia didn't care. Her world had narrowed to one thing: saving Charlie. They climbed into Noah's SUV. Charlie stretched across the back seat, his head resting in Olivia's lap. She stroked his fur, her tears falling silently onto his golden coat. "Hang in there, buddy," she whispered. "We're almost there." Noah gripped the wheel tightly, his voice calm as he called the nearest veterinary clinic. "We have an emergency," he said. "We're bringing him in now. Please be ready." The River Valley Animal Clinic came into view minutes later, its fluorescent sign flickering against the late afternoon sky. 2 staff members were already waiting by the entrance, their faces briefly registering surprise at the sight of Olivia in her wedding dress. Dr. Morgan, a composed woman with kind eyes and a steady demeanor, gestured them inside. "Bring him in," she instructed, holding the door open. Inside the clinic, the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Olivia hovered near Charlie as the vet techs gently lifted him onto the examination table. His breaths were shallow. His normally silky coat looked dull under the harsh lights, and his tail lay limp. Noah stood beside Olivia, his hand resting on her back, offering silent support. "What happened today?" Dr. Morgan asked, her tone professional but compassionate. "He's been acting strange all morning," Olivia explained, her voice trembling. "But just now, he started barking and pulling at me. He's never done that before." Dr. Morgan nodded as she began her examination. "We'll need to run some tests. His symptoms could indicate a heart issue, an infection, or something else. Let's start with the basics." As the vet team worked, Olivia sat down heavily in a chair, her hands gripping the fabric of her gown. Noah crouched beside her, his eyes filled with worry. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we're in this together." Olivia bit her lip, nodding, but her heart felt like it was shattering. Charlie had been with her through everything, losing her father, moving across the country, meeting Noah. He was more than a pet, he was family. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Morgan returned, her face grave. Olivia stood, her knees weak. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Morgan sighed, her expression softening. "Charlie is showing signs of advanced heart disease," she said gently. "His heart is struggling, and the stress of today likely made it worse. I'm sorry to say, this has been building for some time." Olivia clutched Noah's arm as her vision blurred with tears. "But he was fine just a few days ago," she whispered. "How did I not see this?" "Dogs are incredibly resilient," Dr. Morgan replied. "They often hide their pain until it becomes unbearable. Charlie's been trying to tell you something. He knew he needed help, and he knew you'd listen." "What happens now?" Noah asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We can start medication to manage his symptoms and make him comfortable," Dr. Morgan explained. "But given his age and the condition of his heart, we're looking at months, not years." The words felt like a punch to Olivia's chest. She sank into a chair, holding her head in her hands as sobs overtook her. Charlie's head rested weakly on the table, his amber eyes still fixed on her. Despite his frailty, his love for her was unshaken. Noah knelt beside her, his hand on hers. "Olivia," he said gently, "we'll get through this. Charlie's been there for you every step of the way. Now it's our turn to be there for him." This moment would redefine not just her wedding day, but her entire understanding of love and loyalty. As Olivia sat in the waiting room of River Valley Animal Clinic, her pristine wedding dress now wrinkled and streaked with Charlie's fur, her heart felt like it was being torn in two. Across the room, Noah paced with his phone in hand, quietly coordinating with their families to postpone the ceremony. He glanced at her every few seconds, his expression a mix of worry and unwavering support. But Olivia couldn't look away from the door to the exam room, where Charlie lay in the hands of the vet team. Memories flooded her mind, of the first time she saw Charlie as a scrawny puppy at the shelter, his floppy ears too big for his head, and the way he immediately nuzzled into her lap as if to say, "You're mine." He had been there through everything, her father's passing, the nights she cried herself to sleep, and the mornings when his wagging tail reminded her that life still held joy. Now, when he needed her most, she felt powerless. The door swung open, and Dr. Morgan stepped out. Her calm demeanor helped steady Olivia's nerves, though her heart still raced. "We've started Charlie on his medication," the vet explained. "He's resting now, but you can see him. Just be gentle, he's tired." Noah was at Olivia's side in an instant, helping her to her feet as she smoothed her dress and took a deep breath. The two of them walked into the exam room, where Charlie lay on a soft blanket, and 4-drip hooked into his leg. His head lifted weakly when he saw her, his tail thumping ever so slightly. Olivia knelt beside him, her veil brushing the floor as she pressed her face to his fur. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Noah knelt next to her, his hand on Charlie's side. "He's a fighter," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "Just like you." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "This day was supposed to be about us," she said, her voice breaking. "But now I can't imagine leaving him." Noah smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then let's make it about all of us. If Charlie can't be at the wedding, we'll bring the wedding to him." Her eyes widened as she processed his words. "You mean here? In the clinic?" "Why not?" he said, his grin widening. "We've got everything we need. Our families, our vows, and the most important guest of all." For the first time that day, Olivia felt a flicker of hope. "Do you think they'd let us?" "Let's find out," Noah said, pulling out his phone. Within moments, their families were on board, and even Dr. Morgan offered her approval, a warm smile lighting up her face. "This is a first for us," she said, "but I can't think of a better way to celebrate love." An hour later, the waiting room of the clinic had been transformed. Olivia's mother had hastily organized a small arch of flowers, and Noah's sister played a soft tune on a portable speaker. Olivia stood in front of Charlie, her hand resting gently on his side, as Noah joined her, his tuxedo slightly wrinkled but his smile as radiant as ever. Their closest friends and family surrounded them, the small room filled with a quiet, reverent energy. As the officiant began to speak, Olivia felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This wasn't the grand ceremony she had envisioned, but it was perfect in its own way. She exchanged vows with Noah, promising to love him through every joy and challenge life would bring. And when Noah placed the ring on her finger, Charlie gave a weak but unmistakable bark, drawing laughter and tears from everyone in the room. That evening, instead of dancing at a reception, Olivia and Noah sat on their living room floor with Charlie nestled between them, sharing takeout pizza in their wedding attire. They took turns feeding him small pieces of plain chicken, his favorite, while they laughed about the day's unexpected twists. Olivia leaned her head against Noah's shoulder and whispered, "I think this was the best wedding we could have asked for." Noah kissed her hair and replied, "Because it was real." And Charlie made sure we didn't forget what really matters. Before I share what happened in the months that followed and the incredible way Charlie's story shaped Olivia and Noah's lives, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever felt that unbreakable bond with a pet, one that defies words and shows you the true meaning of love, hit that like button. This story is far from over, and it's one you won't want to miss. Stay tuned for part 2, because Charlie's final gift is one that will stay with you forever. The weeks that followed Charlie's diagnosis were a delicate dance between hope and reality. The medication eased his symptoms, allowing him to enjoy small moments of joy, short walks in the park, naps by the fireplace, and the occasional game of fetch with his favorite tennis ball. Olivia and Noah cherished every moment, knowing their time with him was slipping away. But they never spoke of the inevitable. Instead, they focused on making each day count, filling Charlie's life with the love and comfort he had always given them. One frosty morning, Olivia woke to find Charlie lying beside her bed, his head resting on her slippers as he always did. But this time, his breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Her heart clenched as she reached down, her fingers brushing his fur. He looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, a quiet acceptance. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I think it's time." Noah appeared in the doorway, his face pale but steady. He knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on Charlie's side. "We'll call Dr. Morgan," he said softly. But first, let's give him the morning he deserves. They wrapped Charlie in his favorite blanket and carried him to the park where their story had begun. The crisp air bit at Olivia's cheeks as she sat beneath the old oak tree, cradling Charlie in her lap. The park was quiet, the world seemingly holding its breath. She whispered to him, sharing every memory, every thank you she had been holding in her heart. "Do you remember when we met, Charlie?" she said, her voice cracking. "You chose me that day, and you've been choosing me every day since. You've been my protector, my best friend, and my family. I don't know how I'll do this without you." Noah sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You're not losing him," he said gently. "He'll always be with us, in everything we do, in every way we love." Later that afternoon, Dr. Morgan arrived at their home, her presence calm and compassionate. Olivia and Noah carried Charlie to the living room, where the fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the room. They laid him on his bed, wrapping him in his blanket as they sat beside him. Olivia stroked his head, her tears falling freely. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can rest now. We'll be okay. I promise." As Dr. Morgan administered the injection, Charlie's breathing slowed, and he let out a deep, peaceful sigh. In his final moments, his tail wagged faintly, his eyes locked on Olivia's as if to say, "Thank you," and then he was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Olivia's quiet sobs. Noah pulled her close, his own tears falling into her hair. "He knew he was loved," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Every single day, that evening, as they sat in the living room, the emptiness was palpable. Olivia couldn't bring herself to move Charlie's bed or his toys. She stared at the fire, her hands clutching a small box of keepsakes she had kept over the years. Inside were mementos of their life with Charlie, his first collar, a photo of him as a puppy, and the frayed tennis ball he had always carried. But at the bottom of the box, she found something unexpected. It was her father's old gardening glove, worn and faded. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized Charlie must have hidden it long ago. Holding onto it like a treasure, Noah knelt beside her, his brow furrowed. "Is that?" "It's my dad's," Olivia whispered, clutching the glove to her chest. "He kept it all this time." The realization hit her like a wave. Charlie hadn't just been her dog. He had been her bridge to the past, to the memories she thought she had lost. Even in his final moments, he had found a way to remind her of the love that had shaped her life. "He's still taking care of us," Noah said softly, wrapping his arms around her. "Even now," Olivia nodded, her tears falling freely. "Thank you, Charlie," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for everything." The house felt impossibly quiet in the days that followed. Olivia and Noah grieved in their own ways. Olivia through quiet reflection and Noah through small acts of remembrance. Like lighting a candle by Charlie's photo each evening, they leaned on each other, their shared love for Charlie drawing them closer. One night, as they sat by the fireplace, Olivia spoke up. "Do you think I'll ever feel ready to open my heart again?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Noah took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "I think when the time is right, you won't need to ask. You'll just know." His words stayed with her, a quiet reminder that while Charlie's chapter had ended, the story of love he had started was far from over. What legacy had Charlie left behind that would shape Olivia and Noah's next steps? Could they find the strength to open their hearts again? And how would they honor the bond they had shared with him? Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the cycle of love continues in ways they never expected. The days following Charlie's passing felt hollow, like a melody without its rhythm. Olivia found herself reaching for him out of habit, his leash by the door, his bed by the fireplace, only to be met with silence. Noah tried to stay strong, hiding his grief in quiet moments, but Olivia could see it in his eyes, in the way he lingered by Charlie's favorite spot near the window. They both carried the weight of loss, their home quieter, their hearts heavier. One evening, as snow fell softly outside their window, Olivia sat on the couch, clutching the locket that now held a photo of Charlie. "Do you think he knew how much he meant to us?" she asked Noah, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah wrapped an arm around her, his warmth grounding her. "He knew. Every wag of his tail. Every time he looked at us. He knew." She nodded, though tears blurred her vision. I feel like there's so much more I wanted to say to him. So much more I wanted to do." Noah kissed the top of her head. "We gave him everything we could, and he gave us everything he had. That's all love is, isn't it?" A few weeks later, Olivia found herself drawn to the park where their story with Charlie had begun. The air was crisp, the ground dusted with frost, but the familiar sight of the old oak tree gave her a sense of comfort. She sat beneath it, her hands folded in her lap, and closed her eyes. The memories came rushing back, the way Charlie had bounded into her life, the laughter he had brought, the quiet moments of solace. As she opened her eyes, a small girl holding a leash ran past, her laughter ringing out in the still air. The golden retriever at her side barked playfully, their bond evident in every step they took together. Olivia smiled softly, her heart aching but also warming at the sight. Charlie had taught her so much. How to love without reservation, how to give without expecting, and how to cherish even the smallest moments. She realized then that his legacy wasn't just in the memories they shared. It was in the way he had changed her, the way he had taught her to see the world. One morning, as Olivia sipped her coffee by the window, Noah approached with a gentle smile. "I was thinking," he began, "maybe we could visit the shelter. Not to adopt, just to bring some supplies. You know, something to honor Charlie." Olivia hesitated, her grip tightening on her mug. The thought of stepping into the shelter where she had first met Charlie felt daunting, as though it might reopen wounds she wasn't ready to face. But then she thought of Charlie, how selflessly he had loved, how he had brought joy into their lives even in his final days. "I think that's a good idea," she said softly. "Let's do it." When they arrived at the shelter, the familiar sounds of barking and excited chatter greeted them. Olivia carried a box of blankets and food while Noah held a bag of toys and treats. The shelter staff welcomed them warmly, thanking them for their donation. As they walked through the rows of kennels, Olivia felt a pang of sorrow for the dogs waiting behind the bars, their eyes filled with hope and longing. She paused in front of one kennel, where an older Labrador mix with a graying muzzle sat quietly, his tail wagging gently as their eyes met. "Who's this?" Olivia asked the staff member nearby. "That's Duke," the woman replied. "He's 10 years old. His family had to surrender him when they moved into assisted living. He's sweet as can be, but older dogs, well, they're harder to place." Olivia knelt down, her heart tightening as Duke pressed his nose against her hand through the bars. His eyes held a quiet wisdom, a gentleness that reminded her of Charlie. She felt a tear slip down her cheek. "Hi, Duke," she whispered. "You're a good boy, aren't you?" Noah crouched beside her, watching the interaction with a knowing look. "What do you think?" he asked softly. Olivia hesitated, her emotions swirling. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "But maybe he is." Noah smiled, placing a hand on her back. "It's not about replacing Charlie. It's about continuing what he taught us. Love doesn't stop. It just finds new ways to grow." That evening, Duke followed Olivia and Noah into their home for the first time. He explored cautiously, his nose sniffing every corner, before settling by the fireplace where Charlie's bed had once been. Olivia placed a new bed in the same spot, and Duke lay down with a contented sigh. As Olivia sat beside him, stroking his fur, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at the photo of Charlie on the mantel, "for showing me that love never ends." Duke's tail thumped softly against the floor, and Olivia smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of another chapter. One Charlie had prepared her for all along. How would Duke shape their lives in the days to come? Could he continue the cycle of love Charlie had started? Stay tuned for the next chapter, where love finds a way to heal and grow in the most unexpected ways. The weeks that followed Duke's arrival were a quiet transformation. He settled into their home with a calmness that felt as if he had always belonged. His movements were slower, his steps careful, but there was a warmth about him that filled the spaces Charlie had left behind, not as a replacement, but as a gentle continuation of their story. Duke quickly found his rhythm with Olivia and Noah. He followed Olivia into the kitchen each morning, sitting patiently as she brewed her coffee. He waited by the door when Noah returned from work, wagging his tail with a quiet excitement. At night, he slept in the same spot Charlie once had, beside their bed, his gentle snoring a comforting sound that lulled them to sleep. One chilly Saturday morning, Olivia decided to take Duke to the park where she and Charlie had shared so many memories. She hesitated at first, unsure if her heart could bear revisiting those sacred moments. But something about the way Duke looked at her that morning, his tail wagging faintly, his eyes filled with trust, gave her the courage she needed. They walked together down the familiar path, Duke's leash loose in her hand. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched beneath their feet. When they reached the old oak tree, Olivia paused, a lump forming in her throat. This was where it had all started, with Charlie bounding into her life and, later, with Noah joining her under these very branches. She sat down beneath the tree, and Duke settled beside her, resting his head on her lap. Her fingers stroked his fur as she looked out over the park, memories swirling in her mind. "You know," she said softly, "this is where I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Charlie showed me that love could heal anything. And now, here you are, proving it all over again." Duke's tail thumped gently against the ground, and Olivia smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Over time, Duke began to thrive in ways Olivia and Noah hadn't expected. His steps became steadier, his energy brighter. On good days, he would chase a ball with the enthusiasm of a dog half his age, his joyful barks echoing across the yard. On quieter days, he would lie at Olivia's feet as she read by the fire, his presence as steady and comforting as the warmth of the flames. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Olivia found Noah sitting on the floor by Duke's bed. He was scratching behind Duke's ears, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Noah looked up, a soft smile playing on his lips. "About how much he reminds me of Charlie," he said. "Not in the way he acts, but in the way he makes me feel, like everything is going to be okay." Olivia rested her head on Noah's shoulder, her hand on Duke's back. "I think that's what Charlie wanted," she said, "for us to keep loving, even when it hurts. And Duke, he's helping us do that." Noah nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "It's funny, isn't it? How love never really leaves. It just keeps finding its way back to us." As the seasons changed, Olivia and Noah found new ways to honor Charlie's legacy. They became regular volunteers at the animal shelter, helping older dogs find homes. Every time they met a dog who reminded them of Charlie's resilience or Duke's gentle spirit, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. One day, as they were leaving the shelter, a young couple approached them with a story that felt like déjà vu. "We heard about Duke," the woman said, her voice filled with emotion. "Your story inspired us to adopt him." Olivia looked down to see the couple holding the leash of a shy, gray-muzzled beagle mix. The dog's eyes were timid but hopeful, much like Duke's had been that first day. "What's his name?" Olivia asked, her voice catching in her throat. "Harvey," the man replied. "He's older, and nobody wanted him. But we thought, maybe he was meant for us." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she knelt to greet Harvey. She stroked his soft fur, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You'll be amazed at what he can teach you," she said, looking up at the couple. They always find a way to change your life. That evening, Olivia and Noah sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Duke lay at their feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. Olivia rested her head on Noah's shoulder, the locket around her neck glinting softly in the fading light. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "Charlie brought us Duke. And Duke, he's already teaching us how to love even more." Noah smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "They're a team, aren't they? Always watching over us. Always reminding us what really matters." Olivia nodded, her heart full. Love, she realized, was not a single moment or a single bond. It was a thread that wove through their lives, connecting every memory, every loss, every new beginning. Charlie had taught her that, and Duke was proving it. Every single day, as the stars blinked into the night sky, Olivia felt a quiet peace settle over her. Love had found its way back to them, just as it always would. And she knew, deep in her heart, that it would never stop. Would Duke's presence inspire Olivia and Noah to open their hearts even further? What new lessons would this chapter of love bring into their lives? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. Their story was far from over. As we close this chapter in the lives of Olivia, Noah, Charlie, and Duke, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining me on this heartfelt journey. Stories like these remind us of the incredible bonds we share with our furry companions and the lessons they teach us about love, resilience, and healing. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Tap into more inspiring tales by subscribing to Tapestry of Worlds. Together, we'll continue exploring the moments that shape us, the relationships that define us, and the extraordinary worlds waiting to be discovered. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever shared a connection with a pet that changed your life? I'd love to hear your story.